and I get this question all the time in my groups from potential clients. So I thought it would just make sense to go live here so we can talk about it. People always ask me, what's a deconstruction coach? What is deconstruction coaching? Is that the same thing as therapy? Is that the same thing as pastoring or being a mentor? So let's answer. So I'm going to tell you what a deconstruction coach is, what we accomplish, and who it's for, which also will lead us to who it's not for and who really is not ready for deconstruction coaching. Before we hop into that, in case you're new here, I'm Angela J. Harrington, Faith Deconstruction Coach, host of the Deconstructing Faith Summit and the Faith Deconstruction Cafe, which is my free Facebook community here. I love helping people break free from toxic religion. And one of the ways I do that is through deconstruction coaching. So what the heck is that? Well, the thing that usually surprises people most about deconstruction coaching is that I come into the relationship as a guide, not an authority. So a good faith deconstruction coach or a good life coach or any type of coach, for that matter, should be coming in as a partner. Okay. So a lot of times in therapy, in mentoring and pastoring and those kind of relationships, there's a hierarchy. The thing I love most about coaching is there's no hierarchy, because I may be the expert on deconstruction, I may be the expert on coaching, but you're the expert on you. And that's really important, because if I came in and tried to tell you exactly what you needed to do or where you needed to go next, then it's not really any different than the toxic systems you're coming out of. So number one thing that you need to know about deconstruction coaching is that your deconstruction coach is a guide, not an authority. Okay, so there's no hierarchy and there's no authority. The second thing is it's a little different than therapy. It's really good as a partner with therapy. So I always recommend all my clients have therapists. Now, I understand therapy is not affordable for everybody. And also it can be really hard to find therapists who are familiar with religious trauma. So if you can't have a therapist, a coach is a good option, but ideally you've got both. You've got both, because a coach is a sounding board. A faith deconstruction coach is really a sounding board that allows you to process things aloud. And that can be similar in therapy, but therapists are coming from a health, wellness, health, dishealth sort of paradigm, whereas they're driving in a lot and they're doing a lot of back work, and they're diagnosing, they're doing a lot of things around mental health. The thing about deconstruction is you can come in to deconstruction coaching without having done all of that healing work and without having those different mental health situations addressed. Now, not knocking that. Absolutely needs to be done. If therapists gave out frequent flyer miles, I would have a ton. I would be totally maxed out. Okay. But the key about faith deconstruction is that it helps address where you're at right now. So if you have a good coach, faith deconstruction is going to be a little bit easier, because you're going to be able to say, in this moment, here's what's going on. How do I deal with it? What do we do? And you'll be able to process some of that old stuff too. But like I said, it's not a replacement for therapy. And I highly recommend both, especially if you are in one or more of those groups of people that are typically marginalized, the people who are, pushed out of the center of religious communities. Okay. So that's the second thing. The third thing is faith deconstruction coaching really provides reflection. I'm here to reflect back to you what's going on. And sometimes it's what you can't see. So I'm going to have opinions. I'm going to be able to see things that you can't necessarily see. But a good coach is going to be able to reflect those things back to you without creating this pressure to be like, oh yeah, that's 100% what's going on, right? Being a coach isn't about mandating a cure. Like, oh, here's what's going on and here's how we're going to fix it. That's more of a consultant and possibly a mentor. Mentors sometimes take that role. But that's not what happens in faith deconstruction coaching, at least not in the modality, the model that I use. So my goal, one of my big goals, is to reflect back to you the things that maybe you can't see just yet, or the things that you do see and you do know, but perhaps you don't trust. Okay. So that's kind of a basic overview, 30,000 foot overview of what deconstruction coaching is. Let's talk for a second about what we accomplish. So the goal is exploration. I can't tell you exactly where you're going to end up at the end. If I could, then it's not really faith deconstruction and it's not really coaching. So what we're going for is exploring and curiosity and trying to just pick apart all the things that you believe and figure out what you want to believe. Because a lot of us have really had beliefs pushed on us and haven't had the opportunity to say, oh, wait, yeah, I want faith deconstruction coaching, but I don't want to lose my faith. Because if you're not willing to loosen up control and like let go of that outcome, it's not actually deconstruction, right? You may change some beliefs, but it's not picking apart your belief system and completely examining them, honestly examining every single piece of it, because you're still only examining things that you think will lead you to that predetermined outcome. The second thing, it requires curiosity. So faith deconstruction, like one of the big goals is getting away from the absolutism. It's either right or it's wrong. It's good or it's bad. And again, not trying to control the outcome, but by saying, I'm really not sure what's here, we start to learn to trust the nuance and understand that there is a lot of gray areas that those toxic religious environments don't teach us about. Because it's a lot easier for us to assimilate or to fit into a community if there's a hard right and there's a hard wrong. Okay. If things are either absolutely good or they're absolutely bad. And so one of the things we accomplish in faith deconstruction is changing that absolutism and saying there might be a little bit true there might be a little true there, but what about the middle? What's in the middle? And it doesn't mean being wishy-washy and not having any opinions. It just means recognizing that there are more than two opinions on any given topic. The third thing that we really try to accomplish in faith deconstruction coaching is, I think, probably the greatest benefit. It's the best thing that happens to people who go through faith deconstruction with open hands without trying to control the outcome, and that's learning to trust yourself again. And you're like, wait a second, if I'm questioning my faith, what does that have to do with trusting myself? Well, where did you learn not to trust yourself? Where did you learn that your thoughts and your desires and your choices and your urges and your intuition and your feelings weren't trustworthy? Yeah, for most of us, it was either in a religious community or it was in a community like I live in the Midwest, where it doesn't matter if you go to church or not, you're getting just bombarded constantly with that Christian belief system. So there are definitely pockets of society that are tied to Christian beliefs, whether you go to church or not. So in those spaces, whether it's in the church or around the church, you probably learned that all of those things are not trustworthy. All those parts of you aren't, it's not good to trust them. So how do we undo that damage? Well, we start unpacking all those lies and all those limiting beliefs and all those falsehoods where we were taught that God thinks that we're just not able of making good decisions. So that, I think, is the most powerful thing, because you can read all of the articles, you can spend your whole life researching some of these topics that we could deconstruct. But if you don't learn how to trust yourself, how do you make decisions about all that information that you're pulling in? Okay, and then the final thing that I want to talk about is who's ready for deconstruction, because there's a lot of people who are like, oh, deconstruction is trendy and it's sexy and people are just doing it to fit in. But I have to tell you, there's nothing sexy about deconstruction. Now, sex is better after deconstruction if you untangle yourself from all the purity culture crap, but being in the process of deconstruction itself is not sexy. And I don't actually think it's trendy. I think it's something that's been around for a really long time. But because we have instant access to, the internet and to articles and to other people's stories, I think we're just seeing that it's more and more prevalent. I think the conversations are happening more in the public. And I do think there are more people deconstructing over the last few years, but it's mostly that it's moving into the public. So it's not for everybody. I'll be totally honest. So who is it for? People who are tired of being told what to believe. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago about what faith deconstruction is, because if you want somebody to tell you what to believe, this isn't the space. I can tell you what's out there. I can tell you where to access that firsthand information, then be able to go make a decision. I can tell you to trust yourself more. But if I'm telling you what to believe, if you're in faith deconstruction just so that somebody else would tell you what to believe, there's a really good chance you're just going to end up in another toxic religious system. Okay. And maybe it's not religious, maybe it's an a-religious system. But if you're constantly relying on other people to give you the right answers and tell you what the safe answers are, you're just going to end up following another set of people and not necessarily being able to trust your own intuition and grow into a healthy spirituality. And I personally, like, people get really mad at this, but I don't actually care what you believe. As long as you are flourishing spiritually and you're not out there doing a bunch of damage, harming people, cool. I hope you find what you're looking for. That's kind of my goal as a coach. The second thing is, it's faith deconstruction coaching, and faith deconstruction itself is really good for people who are ready to be curious and even a little bit vulnerable and are tired of being fake. They're tired of the mask you have to put on to fit in. They're tired of the whole fake it till you make it thing and are just ready for some honesty. Faith deconstruction is ridiculously vulnerable. I always tell people that it is, and then they get in there and they're like, whoa, I didn't know this is what we were doing, right? But that's just part of it, because when you start questioning, when you start pulling on all those little threads, you get really vulnerable. And that kind of leads us to the last one. When you start pulling on all those threads, you've got to recognize that most of us, almost all of us, have some sort of privilege and some sort of influence where we benefit from this imbalanced structure, this imbalanced power structure that toxic religion thrives in. And, in some ways, toxic religion has created it. So, the third type of person, the third thing you need to know if you're considering faith deconstruction is you got to at least have some little modicum of being ready to stop leveraging this toxic system and the privilege that you have within this toxic system at the cost of other people. Because if you're only willing to deconstruct or to challenge the harm that's coming your way, then you're missing a whole lot of harm that's happening to other people just because you don't see it. And we see this a lot with the rise of Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism. We see this a lot when Black Lives Matter was really making a lot of headway and getting a lot of press and helping people understand the oppression of Black and brown people in our country. The pushback was people didn't want to deal with privilege. They didn't want to deal with their own privilege. And so they were very, very defensive and very pushed back against this idea that other people have different experiences. And if that's where you're at, deconstruction is going to be challenging. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but one of the things you're going to bump into first is how to look at other people's stories and recognize that just because you didn't experience it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Right? So other people have experiences. Other people have been harmed more. In most cases, other people have been harmed more by this toxic system that benefits you in some ways. Okay. So those are really the keys to faith deconstruction. I think that there's a lot of people who are ready for it. Most of the time, if you're asking, like, what is deconstruction coaching? What is deconstruction? What are the goals? Is it right for me? Most of the time, that means you're ready. Even if you don't feel ready. Honestly, if you wait until you're totally confident and ready, you've probably walked away from deconstruction, right? You've probably wasted a lot of time wondering. So if you're wondering if it's right for you, you probably are. A couple of ways I can tell you. If you are at the point where you're like, I'm not sure, this could be right for me, reach out, go over to angelajharrington.com, reach out on my website, and let's just talk. Let's see what the options are. If you are ready, one-on-one faith deconstruction coaching is available. Absolutely love it. Private phone calls, Zoom calls with me. You get all the attention and you get all the space held to work through your stuff. If that's not a good option for you right now, or if you just want to start a little bit slower and maybe not go quite so deep, I have a group coaching program called the Wilderness Community. It's only $29 a month, and we learn all kinds of stuff. This month, we're talking about sex. We're talking about recovering from purity culture. And I have a guest. I have an amazing guest that comes in every month. This month it's Lori Kimberly. She's coming in next week, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation. We always have the best conversation. So check that out. You can also go to angelajharrington.com. Like I said, it's only $29 a month, and you're just going to get a ton of value from that. So let me know. Have you tried faith deconstruction coaching? Are there questions you have that I didn't answer? Drop them in the comments below, and I will be happy to circle back a little later today and see if I can get them answered for you as quickly as possible. Thanks so much for being here. Hope to see you in one of those communities soon.